Hey guys, remember for Legends Tomorrow, Season 1, Episode 12, Last Refugee. I was really looking forward to this episode. The premise of this episode in general really intrigued me. I thought that we could have gone in some really cool directions with this, maybe see some of the characters' past lives, things that they did, like, back in their past and things like that, and I was really looking forward to seeing how this episode would be. And, I will say, I think the concept of this episode was really interesting. It did do some cool things this episode, but what followed was probably the most messiest episode of the show we've had so far. I mean, this episode was messy, it was very abrupt, it was just very underwhelming at points, just everything in this episode, it just didn't work. There was way too much going on in this episode, I think. There was definitely a villain that just wasn't all that intimidating, and for me, like I said, probably the most messy episode we have had this show so far. I really was not as big as a fan of this episode as I wanted to be, but the thing is, there are some things that worked very well here. It's just how they do it differently, then I think it could have been a lot better. But let's get into this episode, because there is a lot of stuff I want to talk about, obviously, but it's still, this episode, like I said, was very messy. So we start off with the Time Masters Council. The Time Masters sentence Calyx Drusen to death via Omega Protocol. Zaman informs Drazen that the Pilgrim has made contact with Drazen's younger self. Drazen grabs a gas and disappears, and the Pilgrim enters the chamber. She's informed that her next assignment is to dispose of Rip's team, and she is to hunt down their younger selves and eliminate them. Basically, she told you that right away. Here's the thing. Pilgrim is not interesting. There's nothing interesting about her. She simply is just another hunter that basically is going after them, and there's nothing interesting about her. So basically, the plot is interesting, with her having to find their younger selves and eliminate them. That very much is interesting. It's just what they do with it. Because we go to 1990 in Central City. Len, Mick, and Rip are posing as firefighters at a young Mick's house as it burns. Rip tells them to keep an eye out for the Pilgrim. Sarah and Jax are now at the house, tell the others that young Mick isn't inside, but his parents are dead. And nearby, young Mick watches the house burn. The Pilgrim's behind him and prepares to kill him. Now, it was cool to see, how these characters, things that happen in their life, like their past lives, things they've been through. The Pilgrim prepares to kill him. Adam arrives, blasts her unconscious, tells young Mick to come with him if he wants to live, which, really stupid line when he's like, I always want to stay. I'm like, that's just stupid. Later, at Wave Rider Time Jumps, Jack and Mick watch young Mick, and Jack explains that he told young Mick that they are secret agents for Argus, and disgusted, Mick walks off. He does not want his older self to know that, because obviously they're not secret agents, but the way they had to basically try to hide who they really are to their younger selves, I thought was a really cool idea. I definitely did like that. Again, they just didn't really do much with it. There's not really that fear of, our younger self could find out who we really are. There's not really that fear here. Kendra and Sarah are sparring and discuss the situation. Sarah figures that Kendra is ignoring Kate's advice to break up with Ray. Kendra wants to spring it on Ray when the time is right, and just, again, I'm not a fan of this whole Kendra subplot. I just don't think it's working for me. I was not interested in the way that this was going for me. I mean, again, like I said, they have done really the least interesting part of this entire season has been Kendra. They haven't really done anything interesting with her. Her entire plot this season has been, I'm over this guy, no, I'm not over this guy, and they really need to figure out what they want to do here, because as we know last week, she did get that warning from Kate that she needs to break up with Ray, which I think is very interesting, but what they do with this episode just isn't interesting at all. They really just made it kind of repetitive and boring, I have to say. So when Mick arrives on the bridge, Stein suggests that young Mick might need a shoulder to cry on after losing his family, and Mick says that he doesn't cry, thanks Ray for saving him. Rip explains that the Omega Protocol calls for precision, and multiple attempts by the Pilgrim at one target could do irreparable, temporal damage, so she only has one chance to kill each of them. Gideon informs them that the Pilgrim time ship is heading to Starling City, not Star City, this was back when it was called Starling City. In 2007, they figured that the killer is going after Sarah next, and obviously, this is obviously a problem. They need to make sure that Sarah lives, and we go to Starling City in 2007, and we see Lance, but with that really weird, haircut he had in, like, seasons 1 and 2. It was cool to see that side of Lance again. I definitely did like seeing that. We see at the station, Lance has arrested young Sarah, handcuffed her to a desk, which I gotta say, Katie Lutz was the most convincing. Definitely, out of all the young people we saw, Katie Lutz was by far the most convincing, mainly because, I mean, she just does a very good job at playing young. She has one of those faces where she can play a teenager still, and she does it very well. I think she did a very good job here. The Pilgrim fights her way in, taking out any cops in her way, and Lance frees young Sarah, tells her to get out. She runs, and Pilgrim leaps through the window, shoves Lance across the room. The Killer prepares to shoot young Sarah. White Canary shows up and attacks her. Heatwave comes in behind White Canary and watches as the Pilgrim takes out White Canary. Young Sarah realizes who her adult self is, and Heatwave finally kills the Pilgrim with a heat blast, and basically it seems like they've now killed the Pilgrim. Like, the Pilgrim's no longer someone they need to deal with, which I thought was interesting. I'm like, there's no way they actually killed the Pilgrim. She's not actually dead. So Now they've protected young Sarah. Back on Wave Rider, Sarah locks up young Sarah in the cargo bay with young Mick. Meanwhile, Gideon is able to track the Pilgrim, and this is where the episode becomes extremely messy, because at first it seemed okay, kind of formulaic, but it made sense, where the Pilgrim could go basically anywhere she wanted to, just one place at a time. But now, Gideon can't track the Pilgrim, and this is where the episode just lost me. After this, it kind of just lost me. Rip warns that without a way to track her, she can target any of them at any point in time, which makes no sense whatsoever how that makes any sense. I have no idea how that's supposed to make any sense whatsoever, how she can just randomly target them. I just don't get that. That doesn't make any sense. And he explains the Time Masters are helping her conceal her track, and the important thing is not to panic. Rip points out that she can't remove him or Kendra from the timeline. Those are the two people that just can't happen to, obviously because he's not really from their time, and Kendra, you know, she just is reincarnated. And Len points out that Rip has never told them anything about his past, and Ribbon says that they're not as valuable if they know nothing about his past, and we do kind of get to find some stuff there, but I don't really think they did what they should have done with Rip. I honestly want to see some flashbacks of Rip's past, and we don't really see that. We hear about it, but we don't really get to see it. And Sarah then notices the younger cells and the security cameras fighting. She goes to the cargo base. Young Sarah complains that young Mick said that she smelled nice. Sarah tells young Mick that he's not the other prisoner's type and says that they're safer where they are. Younger Sarah demands answers. Sarah tells her that they look alike because they're like family, and she assures younger self that Lance will never lose her and leaves. And that line I really love, that Lance will never lose you. It's a good line. I understand. It was kind of cheesy, but I thought it was good overall. In his quarters, Ray's eating some of Rip's secret stash of cereal when Kendra comes in. He admits that he's on edge because of the threat to him in the past, and when things get crazy, Ray thinks of the 2 years the two of them were together in Hub City. And again, one of my favorite parts of this season were them in the 50s. I wish they would have done more of that. He tells Kendra he was about to propose to her when he suddenly collapses in pain, and Kendra then calls Gideon for help. They get Ray to the medbay. The AI confirms that Ray's suffering from severe internal injuries. They find a temporal anomaly in Ray's timeline in December 19, 2014. Near Palmer Tech, and Ray sets course for 2014. Now, of course, December 19th, this would be when Oliver was supposedly killed. This is back when Oliver was supposedly killed. We go to Star City 2014. The Pilgrim smashes Ray across the room, then prepares to kill him. Firestorm arrives, fires a nuclear blast. The Pilgrim turns it back on him. Rip grabs young Ray. They try to escape, and the Pilgrim blasts them down. This is my thing with the episode. The Pilgrim just going to them one by one. We don't really get to flesh them out at all. We don't really get to see them in this time period. We really don't get to see them as their younger selves, because we basically just saved them, and we didn't really get to do much with them. For me, it just didn't really add much to the episode. Kendra stays with Ray, tells him that they have however long they have, and she wants to spend it with him. Rip grabs a hard light projector from the Atom suit, blasts the Pilgrim through the window. On Wave Rider, Ray's vitals stabilize, and Kendra tells him that she meant what he said, and he figures that she found the engagement ring. It's lying on the floor, and Ray tells Kendra to take it, and that he wants her to have the engagement ring, basically. As we know, he proposed to her when they were in the 50s, and he still, means it. He still wants to propose to her. So when the others return to Wave Rider, Rip explains the Pilgrim can manipulate time in her immediate vicinity, and Lon points out that the Pilgrim won't be going after Rip, and Rip ignores him and has Gideon plot set a course for the birth points of the teammates that Pilgrim hasn't targeted yet, and Mick warns that if they take too long getting their captives home, then they will all disappear from the timeline. Obviously, that is a huge detriment to them. So, again, I just didn't feel the stakes. I really didn't. Just the way this episode was going was very messy. So Sarah checks on Kendra, who explains that their Ray is healing quickly now their past self is in the hospital. Kendra shows her friend the engagement ring, explains that Ray proposed to her. She admits that she's never thought about marriage and doesn't know what to do. And again, just the fact that this was the thing we focused the most on out of everything, this was the most consistent, was this stuff with Sarah and Kendra. I just didn't care. Sarah asks Kendra if she likes babies, says that she needs her help. Then she'll help Kendra figure out what she should say to Ray. They leave unaware that Ray overheard them, which really stupid, honestly. We then go to Central City 1972. Posing as nurses, Sarah and Kendra go to the hospital maternity ward. They find a baby Len. The woman coo over the baby and then leave with it, which really, really stupid scene. When they were just cooing over the baby, I'm like, what the hell am I watching? Like, it was not funny at all. I thought it was really annoying, honestly. In the cargo bay, young Mick tries to jimmy the door open. When young Sarah touches the lock, Gideon reads her as her older self. Mick arrives with Kendra, Sarah, and baby Snarts, and they put together their younger selves in charge of the baby. The team then prepares to abduct the baby, Stein and Jax, and Rip says that none of them should participate in abducting their younger selves for fear of a paradox, and Stein is intrigued by the concept of holding his younger self, and Jack says that, and this is where this just didn't work here. We find out that his father James shipped out before his mother went into labor and died 2 weeks later in Somalia. Now, this is supposed to be the most emotional moment of the episode, pretty much, the emotional crux here, what we get with Jack's here, this little bit of information. It was good development. The problem is, we haven't heard about this till now, and the fact that they want us to care in the episode, you just don't, because we're hearing about it for the first time. We just don't really feel that emotion that we should be. It feels very filler, and it shouldn't be, because this is Jax's life, and we should feel that, but we don't really feel anything there. And I'll get to why. So we go to Ivytown 1950. Rip and Mick arrive as Mrs. Stein gives birth to her son with her husband Self. They claim that they were heading for the nearby hospital and saw the car. The two men then take the baby, tell the Steins to meet them in the hospital, and again, seems like nothing bad is going to happen here. So then we go to 1993, where most of the episode takes place, the rest of the episode takes place pretty much, and Ray and Stein go to the hospital where Jax is being born. They see James, and Stein says they need to find Jax to give him a moment with his soon-to-be dead father. They bring Jax in, he recognizes James, and Stein tells him to speak from his heart. Jax says he thought James was supposed to be shipping out, and again, this is where it just didn't work for me. Because we found out in this episode, the whole situation with James and Jax, you just don't feel that emotion. You don't feel like this is as important as it should be. For me, this just kind of felt very messy, and it just didn't do much for me, unfortunately. I wanted to do a lot more, but it just didn't do much of anything for me, I have to say, mainly just because of the fact that I do care about Jax. It's not the fact that I don't care about Jax. That's not what this is about at all. It has nothing to do with me not caring about Jax. What it has to do with is the fact that we are hearing about this for the first time, and because we're hearing about it for the first time, I just didn't get that emotional impact that I should be having, and, I just didn't feel it here. So, he does say that he hopes Jax will get to raise a child one day. James says to leave and asks Jax for a nurse to tell his wife they'll be home as soon as he can. And basically, Jax has prevented the death of his father. Jax says that there's something he has to tell him. However, he reconsiders, simply offers his congratulations, and he was going to tell him what was going to happen, but he figures that he doesn't want to change the future, so he doesn't tell him. So in general, this really didn't do much of anything, and I don't really know why we even delved into it. It didn't do anything. It didn't make us feel anything. It just kind of felt like something that was there just to give Jax something to do. And I've said it before, Jax is definitely one of the characters that I think has really adjusted well to the show. Like, as the show goes on, I'm loving Jax more and more. But this episode really just felt like it was just filler with Jax. Like, we just had this random thing with Jax that should be a lot more important than it is, but it's not, because of the fact that we haven't had that emotional connection to his father that, Jax had, so we don't really care as much. So the Pilgrim enters the maternity ward a few minutes later, discovers that the baby is gone, and Wave Rider arrives at the building in an indeterminate time, and Rip leaves the others outside, explains that they need a safe harbor to keep their younger selves. A woman, Mary Xavier, comes out. Rip calls Mary mother inside, and Mary serves tea, explaining that she's Rip's adopted mother, and she addresses Rip by his name as Michael, which I thought was interesting, and explains that Time Masters adopt new identities. Mary assures them that her loyalty is to her children, not to the Time Masters, and she cares about her children more than them, and Rip tells the others that the Time Masters recruit orphans from throughout history. They bring them to the Refuge. Now, this was interesting, finding this out, but it did feel like this should have been next week's episode rather than this episode. This episode should have been saving everyone, getting to find out everyone. Then next week's episode should have been, can we protect everyone? That should have been next week's episode. It's just, again, they do this all the time. It feels like the show should be focusing on this, but it goes so fast. It feels like they need to focus more on this than they did on this, and for me, they really need to focus less on this whole, Sarah Kendra situation and focus more on saving all these people. That's what this episode should have been. Next week's episode should have been the Refugee episode. I think that's just what they should have done. I understand they only have 16 episodes, but come on. I mean, you could have just stretched it out a little bit. So, Mary assures them that, and basically, I did think this was interesting, that the Time Masters do bring orphans in. I thought that was interesting. Mick talks to his younger self, who's playing with a match. The older man knows his younger self set the house on fire, and I thought that was an interesting thing that we found out, that he actually set the house on fire. I mean, we've known this, but it does add something there. Young Mick insists that he didn't want to kill his family. Mick says that his younger self fell in love with the flames, but realized that he couldn't control them, and he ran. He tells Young Mick that he'll kill him if there are any more accidents, and Young Mick says that he sounds just like his dad, and you can see that Mick really actually wants to help him. Even though Mick, is kind of gone this villainous direction, he doesn't want him to turn out this way. He kind of wants to turn things around. It definitely did like seeing that. So, Rip is watching the children where Mary gives him some mince pies for his friends. Here's the thing that didn't make sense to me with that scene, though. If Mick is telling his, this to his younger self, why couldn't Jax have told his father about the whole situation? I mean, why does Mick get to change things, but Jax doesn't? That just didn't make sense to me, and it didn't really seem like they cared about that kind of stuff. So later in Wave Rider, Stein approaches Jax Jax says that he knows how he's feeling through their psychic connection. Jax says that he should have saved James and explains he spent his whole life imagining what his father would think of what he has done. And again, I just didn't care. I want to care, but you just don't, because we're hearing about this for the first time and you don't feel that emotion that you should, unfortunately. And it really sucks because there could have been some really good stuff here. We could have had some really good emotional stuff for Jax, and the actor that plays him, I think, does a good job with this scene, but we just don't care because we're hearing it for the first time, and it just isn't as effective as it should be because of that. So Ray approaches Kendra, says he overheard Kendra and Sarah talking earlier. He says that he understands she wants to let him down. Kendra says she wants to be with him. However, she says that her previous self said that they can't last. Ray tells Kendra that she can choose her own happiness or believe her past self, and asks Kendra to tell him what she decides. And again, I don't like the way this was done. I really don't. I don't think that Ray should have just approached Kendra about it. I don't think he should have heard this conversation. I think Kendra should have just done this on her own. I don't think we need to spend so much time on this. I think it's dumb. I'm just not a fan of it. So Rip calls everyone to the bridge, says that Gideon has intercepted a transchronal beacon. It's the Pilgrim. It says that if she can't find them, she'll go after the families of the team members. She has James, promises that all of them will suffer and die unless they surrender their younger selves to her. Rip has Gideon hail the Pilgrim, and he offers himself if she spares the lives of his crew and their loved one. The Pilgrim refuses, saying that her orders are to eliminate the entire team. Rip counters by saying he's offering his own younger self, and Rip Hunter before he became a Time Master. If she eliminates him, then the team will have never existed. And what he's offering here is very interesting, but I really feel that's how the episode should have ended. That should have been the cliffhangers. Rip saying, look, I'm going to offer you my younger self, and then my team won't exist. That should have been the end of this episode. Boom, that should have faded to black. That would have been an awesome cliffhanger, but that's not what happens. Wave Rider goes to an abandoned Time Master's outpost. Rip goes in with Stein, Jackson, Mick. Mary arrives with Rip's younger self, one of the children from the refugee. The woman warns that she doesn't approve of Rip's plan, but figures that he will ignore her. The Pilgrim arrives, says that all of her prisoners are on board her ship. She insists the Time Master sanction her actions and wonders where the others are. Rip says that they're around. The Pilgrim agrees to the prisoner exchange. She teleports James in, agrees to release the other one since she has young Rip. Rip tells his younger self that he'll be fine and sends him forward. And a miniaturized Atom moves forward with him and lands on the boy's shoulder. He then fires a hard light beam at the Pilgrim, who reverses time on him. Captain Cold and White Canary charge forward. He wave combined fire with his partner. The Pilgrim sends their energies back at each other. Really stupid scene. The fact that she was just, freezing everyone, it just felt kind of pointless. Like, okay, she can reverse time, and basically she tries to reverse time on all of them. However, young Rip stabs her in the leg. She loses concentration. The combined energies hit her, reducing her to ash. Jax asks James if he's okay. He offers to help, and he offers to explain. Mary takes young Rip away, and Rip explains that his younger self was a cut purse, and he knew what his younger self would do if threatened. And later back at the refugee, young Rip joins the other children. Mary assures Rip that she'll look after his friends, and Rip says that the first day that he was there, he knew he was home. She says that's why she knows that he'll be back, and Rip leaves. So, a very good scene. I like the way the scene was done. I thought it was good overall. I definitely did enjoy what they did with Mary and Rip. But again, I just felt we could have had a little bit more to this, just a little bit more context, and I would have enjoyed it more, because I don't think this was as fleshed out as it should have been. So Mick finds younger self holding a lit match to his hand, says that he's him. He tells young Mick that it wasn't his fault. Younger Mick admits that he ran out without warning away because he was a kid. Mick says he spent his whole life blaming his younger self for something he didn't mean to do, and he tells young Mick to be better than him and leaves. And again, it's a good scene, but we just didn't get that. You don't care as much as I didn't care as much about any of this as I should. So on Wave Rider, Sarah tells Lance that they'll have to take the amnesia pill to erase his short-term memory, and as he takes the pill, Lance says he always knew that she would protect people and he's proud of her, and okay, that I understood. You can't just change that. You can't, you're not going to change the whole course of who Lance is and everything. You're not just going to do that. But I did think that was a good scene. I definitely did enjoy that, and Rip then approaches Stein, who says that his wife, Clarissa, doesn't seem to remember him, and the Time Master explains that they returned the younger selves to the timeline. None will have ever existed, and Stein thought that he would return to the moment he left, and Clarissa would never know that he was gone, so he didn't say goodbye, and Rip insists that he won't risk Stein's marriage to save his wife. So, basically, now that this has happened, things are really starting to change here, and James takes in everything he saw Jax do, says that now he knows that if Jax became the man he saw, he must have done something right. He says that he wants to be there to see it happen. Jax tells him to keep an eye out for an IED. James realizes that Jax knows his future, and the two men hug. A good scene, again. I like this scene overall. It just, you don't get that emotional connection that you should here. I just wanted to see more with James and Jax. Had we found out that Jax's father died a while ago, then I would have felt more to this, but we didn't, and now that we're finding this out now, you just don't care as much about this relationship. So Ray leaves his wife Jean in his quarters, finds Kendra in the hallway. She said that she was afraid of losing Ray, realized that there was never going to be a right time to get married. Kendra takes out the ring, puts it on, says she wants to marry him, and these two seem like they're actually going to get married. I wish I cared. I just don't, unfortunately. Why? Because I just don't think they spend enough time with Kendra and Ray. I mean, if we would have, like I said, back when they did that episode where they were in the 50s, we should have had an entire episode focused on, Ray, Kendra, and Sarah in the 50s. I would have loved to see that. But unfortunately, because they never did that, I just don't care for this relationship as much as I should. Do I think that it's working out better than I thought it would? Yes, I do think that they have the chemistry. They're just not fleshing this out as well as they could. And for me, I think the show is just way too fast-paced at this point. So the team gets back together. Jax tells Rip what he did. Rip suggests that time wants things to happen, and perhaps it wants Jax and his father to be together. Mick says he just got through giving his younger self advice. And again, we were told that, Rip warns that the time is beginning to set with a new timeline where they didn't exist. They need to quickly locate Savage. The only way to find in time is the one place they know where he'll be when he conquers Earth in 2166, and Rip figures that they have no choice because they have literally run out of time, and that's how the episode ends. So I thought it was a good way to end the episode. Overall, like I said, this episode for me was a lot messier than it should have been. A lot of things I just didn't care as much about that I should, unfortunately, and, for me, it just didn't matter as much to me, and I wanted to care more, but I didn't, and I didn't get that, I just didn't care as much as I wanted to. But I do think it's interesting what's going to happen with Savage. Next week's episode looks amazing. I can't wait to see what happens. Now, next week's episode would have been the season finale, so it does make sense why it's going to be so big. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in next week's episode, definitely. But just this episode for me was very wasted. The Pilgrim did really much of nothing. Their younger selves. I mean, there is some interesting stuff they're doing with that. I'm looking forward to seeing more what they're going to do there. But obviously, we know everything's going to be okay. We know they're going to reset the time. Alright, guys, my computer actually ran out of room, so I didn't get to say the end. But let me just get real quick to what I was saying. Basically, we know they're going to be able to, solve this. We know that they're going to get things back on track. We don't know what's going to happen with Savage, but we do know that things are going to be fixed, and because of the stakes just aren't as high. The problem with the show is that they need to focus more on the interesting aspects. Stop focusing on the Ray and Kendra stuff. It's just not that interesting. Focus more on things like Jax and his father. There's a lot they could have done there, and they didn't really do that. For me, I think the show is just going way too fast. It's doing 100 things. It's going 100 miles an hour, and it's really not, filling in some of the gaps of the things that should be. There are a lot of things that just, I think, are very wasted potential. A lot of this season has been wasted potential, and I think they need to focus more on the interesting elements and focus less on things that just aren't working as much, because there are a lot of things in the show that are working, and then there are those things that just aren't working, and a lot of this episode focused on things that aren't working, and that really kind of pissed me off a little bit. Some of the stuff we found with Rip is very interesting. I like that we found that Rip, picks his own name and what's going on with the refugees, but that all should have been next week's episode. I think that all should have been next week's. Next week's episode looks a lot of fun. Actually, it looks pretty epic, honestly. Like I said, it would have been the season finale, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to be. But we have 4 episodes left, and I don't really know where we're headed. We only have 4 episodes left, and I don't really know what's going to happen with the rest of the season, honestly. I just don't know at this point. It looks like Ray and Kendra are going to get married. I don't really know if this is actually going to happen. We'll have to see what happens with that. What do you guys think of this episode? For me, like I said, just a very messy, wasted potential kind of episode. I think this show just needs to figure out what's working and what's not, because they're just not at this point. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for Empire, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.